Today we listen to our Rabbi of blessed memory speaking on this parasha Tissa. Shalom Priscilla, shalom Sari. ¿Cómo están?
Sí. Hola.
Hola. It's nice to see you. Le gusta a verle a ustedes.
Igualmente.
Gracias.
So para allá, muy interesante.
Sí. ¿Hay algunas a decir?
Pues la enseñanza siempre se pone a reflexionar sobre la importancia de darle ese lugar al Eterno. No adorar a ningún otro imagen. No sé si alguien nos puede ayudar con la traducción.
See, I don't know if Alejandro is there, but I know she said it's an important message. And there's a lot of teaching. I know the rabbi tends to speak in circles, but he always comes back and draws a lesson for us. Because, I mean, when I speak to people about the Torah, there's a tendency of always wanting to put everything in categories or in a box, or that everything should be spelled out for us. But God paints pictures. He always, even Yeshua, spoke in parables. And these parables, these teachings, had a moral to them. Even if a parable wasn't a true story, it still had a teaching, like the parable of the prodigal son that he ended with. And it's a good lesson for us, because many of us have had that experience in our own lives where we've gone out and really wasted our lives away. And God simply is always waiting with open arms for us to return to him. And, you know, that's the blessing of walking with our God. I made a few pictures, like a few notes, like the picture of the bride and the groom of Israel being the bride, of God being the groom. Moses was the best man. I love that. The ketubah, which is given to the bride by the groom's family, which is a promise of protection, are the 10 commandments. If we keep the commandments, if we honor this ketubah by remaining faithful, God would always protect us. I mean, it's so clear. It's so beautiful. And we see the pictures, like how he took the ashes of the golden calf and made us drink it because of our guilt. And it reminded him of the verses in Numbers called the sotah. The sotah was where if a husband was jealous, even if she wasn't guilty, all he had to do was to be jealous. In order to find whether she was guilty or not, he would take her to the high priest. There's a very similar teaching in the teachings of the, oh my goodness, I forgot the name of the Hammurabi Codex and other codices of the day, where if a husband was guilty if a husband was jealous of the wife, charging her with adultery, they would make her either swim across a lake full of crocodiles or alligators if she got to the other side and she was she lived, then she was not guilty. And there are other stories like that I can't remember at this time, but if you do a little research, you'll find them. But in this case, he would go to the high priest, and the high priest took the ashes of the red heifer. And if she was innocent, he took the ashes of the red heifer, made a concoction, and she would have to drink it. Now, if she was guilty, she would not want to drink it, even if it wouldn't really happen that if nothing really happened to her, because the people were so superstitious in those days and still are today. Leaving Egypt with all its superstitions, leaving the culture of idolatry has so many superstitions that people are blinded by it. I have a friend who was coming over to see me, and she said she went out of her house and forgot her keys for her car, so she had to go back in. And there's a superstition in her culture that you have to walk in the house backwards. So that took her some time. That's why she was late getting the keys. So, but what God was trying to take us away from was all this idolatry and getting us to refocus on him in absolutely every picture that he paints for us. He is the only one. He is our God. What else did he say? The Creator allows us, just like Moses had to appropriate his own people. He constantly said, I don't want to have anything to do with these people. They're your people. The only reason he was doing it was because God told him to do it. And finally, he got to the point where he really had spent, I guess, so much time with them that he really started to appropriate and forgive them for what they had done to him back in Egypt. And I think God allows us to go through situations that help us appropriate the role that he has given us. Sometimes we don't appreciate what we have when we have it, and then circumstances happen where it's taken away from us, or it's going to be taken away, and then suddenly we wake up and we say, oh, no, I would really like to do this. I really like to have this. And he asked an important question: is Israel faithful today? And it's obvious if we look at Israel not only as being the state of Israel, but the people of Israel, the Jewish people around the world. Are we being faithful to the Creator, or do we make up all our own rules? The answer to that is obvious. And even when he said the golden calf is alive and well, right in front of the Jewish library here, in front of the Sadie Brofman Center, is a calf that was donated that's sitting right outside. That reminds me of the golden calf in our own community. So I don't want to be sitting and talking to myself, because I could just go look in a mirror. So if there's anyone else who has anything to add, thank you for putting your face on. Good to see you. You need to now unmute yourself. Okay, good.
Doesn't mean I want to say anything. I agree with everything you said. I have so much to say, but I can't. It was just so good and so relevant and so meaningful. I don't really know how I can add to this discussion. Just to say, thank God we have a God of mercy, and look how God forgave Aaron for doing the most. It's unbelievable. It would be the equivalent. I don't know. I can't even think of an equivalent nowadays. If I were to maybe go into witchcraft and cast some spells, I mean, that's what he did. I don't know, but God accepts us back.
Yeah.
We turn to him, and,
yeah,
incredible.
I remember Rabbi speaking about that, where that Aaron, he knew was going to be given a very special role. And in order for us to really be humbled, we need to go to do the worst, to do our worst, and remember that we can do our worst. And that keeps us humble, keeps us from thinking that we're something special. God didn't choose us because we're something special. He chose us for the reasons that we may not even be able to see about ourselves. He knows our heart. He knows everything about us. There's nothing we can hide from him. So, and if we pretend that we're so that we're better than others, he'll show us.
Even at our worst, I always say this, but there's something at the core of us. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm not putting it in that kind of light, but at the core of us that has some sort of a desire, when God would say, choose you this day choose, don't choose evil, choose good, whatever. I think at the core, underneath all our shtick, God knows what we really choose. But there's some people who don't, even at the core of their lives, God sees that. They have continued in the way of their evil. Remember, even with, what was the famous lines, let them continue it, like even with Egypt, they just continued in their evil.
Exactly. It's not like God hardened Pharaoh's heart.
No, they just he already saw that they were, so we maybe can't even see when we're in the midst of our disobedience, we can't always see, but I think we all of us pretty much know that there's a kernel at the very base of us, and a very heart that has made a choice.
Right.
It's such a fundamental choice.
I had made so many notes. I don't know if the people who are not on even those of you who are here today, the Wednesday nights, I know it may be difficult for you to follow along in English, but, when we read the Torah for what it says, not for what we want to impose upon it, like what Rabbi Percy always used to say, there's eisegesis and exegesis. Eisegesis is what you put into the Torah, and exegesis is what you take out of it. But when we read it, it really does speak for itself. And, one of my great frustrations is that we have been so brainwashed, people close to me, my own family, friends that I know, going through the Messianic movement, going through Christianity, going through the New Age. I've seen so many things, but we have been brainwashed to believe certain things are truth, and we never go back to the source. And the only source that we have is what God gave Moses on Mount Sinai. That's the only true source that we can trust. Everything else can be changed, can be reinterpreted. Even the things that are in the Tanakh, the things that are in the New Testament, the things that are in the Quran, whatever other writings there are, can be changed to satisfy the agendas of those who want to keep their theology. And we have to look at what it says. When we're faithful, like the ketubah being the 10 commandments, if the bride is faithful, Israel is faithful to his and remains faithful to the ketubah, which was the 10 commandments that were given to us, he will protect us. He will watch over us. He will guard us. But when we turn to be unfaithful, that's when we come under he removes his covering and he allows us to suffer the consequences. Now, I know you've heard all this before, but the very first commandment, and he talked about it today, Rabbi spoke about it, about the commandment not to make any images of animals. And Aaron himself, the high priest, made an image of an animal. And
bowed down to it.
And they worshipped it. They bowed down to it.
It's not like sorry.
Yeah, it's not like what?
Well, some very Orthodox keep that so literally that you can't even make, like I make drawings which have cows, rabbits. It's not about making an image. It's
exactly
what you attribute to that image.
Exactly. You'll go into many Orthodox homes and they will not have a picture of any animal or anything. But that's not the issue. It's not a picture of an animal. It's so that we won't bow down to it.
Exactly.
We mustn't lose the essence of what he's trying to say. And I'm not sure at this point, I don't think Aaron knew yet that he was going to be called the high priest, that he was chosen as Kohen HaGadol at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, it's not chronological. They had left Egypt. It took about 3 months. They went to the base of Mount Sinai. They were standing there. Moses went up to get the commandments, and he was there 40 days and 40 nights, and they were afraid. The people were afraid. So they go to the next one. His spokesman, Aaron, was the spokesman for Moses because Moses didn't want to speak on his own. So at this point, I don't believe Aaron knew that he had that role. It would be revealed to him later. And the high priest, the Kohen HaGadol, today, if you go into synagogue, people, when you tell people, someone says to you, I'm a Kohen, they go, oh, you're a Kohen. It's a ganze, it's a maise. It's a big deal. And you're not, a Kohen is not allowed to do this, and a Kohen is not allowed to do that. He can't come near the dead, but that's not the issue. The Kohen HaGadol was the servant. The Kohen means a link. It means they would be the servants of the people. They would be literally the butchers. They would be butchering the meat to bring the offerings to God. It was like a hard role, a hard job. It wasn't it wasn't considered one of prestige. It was considered one of high responsibility. He would go into the Kohen HaGadol would go into the Holy of Holies, and he could be killed if he went in a wrong way. Let's say he didn't clean himself, his hands well or his feet well. Remember, it talked about how clean he had to be. And they had to put bells and pomegranates around him so that if they didn't hear the noise while he was inside, all of a sudden they'd have to go in and pull him out because he could be dead. It was a huge responsibility and an awesome and fearful thing to go before God. And I don't think we can possibly understand that. We've lost that whole idea of awesomeness of standing before the presence of God. And sadly, I think it's because of, first of all, no longer honoring our parents, no longer honoring people in society that are in a position of esteem, like teachers, like people in government or whatever. There's no honor or respectability left anymore. There's so much injustice that's going on in those positions where people who are required to be a light to others are now instead darkness. As I was listening to Rabbi, what he was saying then, that was 5 years ago that he spoke this message. And if he spoke to it today, if he was here today with his sense of justice, seeing what is going on in the world, he'd probably have a heart attack. It's gotten so much worse than when he was here. So there's really a lot to take from all of it. And I pray that we can, continue to be a light to others around us, to learn from these things, to speak up when we need to, and that we will not worship the golden calf, because we all have that tendency. Every one of us has a tendency to worship what we can see instead of what is unseen, to not want to agree with what the words that he's given us, but to agree with others, what man says, because it just sounds nicer. It sounds better. But, one day we're not going to have a choice. Everybody will see him. Everybody will know. Oy, can I not wait for that day. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here today. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Miss. Gracias, Sarai. Gracias, Priscilla. Shabbat Shalom to everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to you.
Shabbat Shalom.
And we'll see you, God willing, next Shabbat, or during the week for the studies. Mwah. Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.